What's up? This is Dr. Taylor Krick at the Washington Wellness Center, and I'm super excited about today's video. What happens to your health on a cellular level when you live in fear? And I chose that title just because of the current climate and situation in 2020 and just a lot of, fear-based living. But what we're going to go through is when your cells sense danger. And what can that danger be? That danger can be living in fear, that danger can be toxicity. But this is just an absolutely fascinating concept that we're going to talk about, what literally happens on a cellular metabolic level. But we're also going to go through, what you can do for that and, just some different things. So I'm excited just to dive into this. Here, first off, are some citations where this is coming from. So this is called the cell danger response. It's also called the integrated stress response, and there's some other names for it in the literature, but this is a pretty well established thing in the literature, and the dates aren't on there, but one of these papers is from 2020, one's from pretty recent, so it's pretty new science, but it's what's happening on a cellular level when your cells sense danger. And we're going to go through some of the excerpts from some of these papers, but the first one, the top one, is a perspective paper. So it's talking about two non-mitochondrial specialists. It's talking about the overarching big picture of the cell danger response biology and how this is a new science that connects environmental health. So toxins, fear, chemicals, man-made chemicals, pollutants, with mitochondria and the rising tide of chronic illness. So many people know that we have more chemicals in our environment, we have more stress, we have more radiation, we have more everything, and at the same time more glyphosate, and at the same time chronic diseases keep rising and rising and rising. The cost keeps rising, the burden keeps rising, and our kids have chronic disease now. And so this paper just kind of connects from a big picture perspective how the cell danger response connects the two of those. The second one, by the same guy, Dr. Robert Navio, he's out of UCSD. He's in the Department of Genetics at UCSD, and also the Mitochondrial and Metabolic Disease Center, it looks like. So UCSD School of Medicine. But the metabolic features, so we're going to go through those. So first off, this cell danger response, what does that mean? Well, how do your cells behave when they sense danger? And we're going to go through some of these things step by step. But the important thing in this to me is that the danger can either be real, like real life danger, like toxins, pathogens, or it can be perceived. And that's really important. That's where the fear comes in, is are you living in fear, and are your health concerns based on that fear? But so what are the real dangers? Because there are real dangers that are facing our cells today that they did not see, generations ago. So things like toxins, things like chemicals. There's 80,000 plus man-made chemicals that have entered our environment that have very little safety data, that have very little testing of how they interact with our bodies on a cellular level, but we know they do bad things. So heavy metals, things like DDT, things like which is outlawed, decades ago and is still found in our bodies. Glyphosate, the active ingredient in Roundup. Things like molds and biotoxins, things like BPAs in plastics, and there's a plethora of different citations that I could give. They studied umbilical cord blood and found 287 toxic chemicals in the umbilical cords. There are other studies that show that these toxins are in us from the womb, from birth, but toxins are a real danger to your cells. Pathogens are a real danger to your cells. Viruses, bacteria, things like Lyme disease, things like strep or staph or COVID or herpetic viruses that get in and they can hijack the replication mechanisms of our cells, and they can replicate and all these different things. So your cells sense those and they're like, boy, this is a danger. We need to avoid these things. Or like lack of resources. So malnutrition, undernourished. So if you have a lack of vitamins, if you have a lack of minerals, if you have a lack of oxygen, a lack of resources, your cells are like, whoa, 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 we got a lack of resources. We got to get stingy. We've got to make some moves. And it's the same thing with the perceived dangers of if you have a lack of resources, you're going to be a little more stingy than when you have abundant resources. Like if money's a little tight, you're going for, your ramen noodles and your cheaper food. If money's a little bit looser, you have an abundance of it. It's like, hey, let's go out for a steak dinner. Let's order in a pizza. Let's, do this or that, because you don't care as much, and your behaviors change, you as a person, but so do your cells. So there are real dangers, and then there are these perceived dangers. So things like stress, childhood stress, things like traumas. If you were hurt by somebody decades ago, your psyche remembers that. Your cells remember that. And so let's say it was like, just as an example, let's say it was a man, and maybe around men or certain types of men, your cells and your psyche always kind of sense this danger that you don't even really know about maybe, but your cells are behaving in a certain way because of past traumas or just psychological danger, things like harmful relationships, harmful jobs, things like that. So let's go into some of these quotes from these studies and then talk about what actually happens to your cells. So the concepts of cellular perception and reactivity are critical. Danger can be real or imagined. From the time we take our first breath, our genes are hardwired to treat the world as a dangerous place. Survival is crucial. And to anticipate a struggle to survive. When conditions become extreme, one cell can defend itself with powerful chemical weapons, while another may sacrifice itself to save its neighbors. So we all have different defense mechanisms, and so do our cells. The threshold for cellular reactivity is set by your past experience, which is critical. The perception of safety leads to calm. The perception of danger leads to hypersensitivity. So at a cellular level, anxiety is created when safety is not assured. When there's an uncertainty about nutrient resources or support from your neighbors, or about protection from exposure to a toxin or an alarm signal. This is crucial. When cells are threatened, they behave the way that nations do when they go to war. They harden their borders and they don't trust their neighbors. The biophysical properties of the cell membranes change. The membranes get harder, they get stiffer, they start to put off different danger signals needed to fight infection and heal. Cellular calm is created when environmental uncertainties are removed and the signals of health and safety are restored. It is now well known that a child raised in neglect or extreme adversity carries a lifelong risk of chronic illness and mental health struggles. Adverse childhood events set you up for a more likelihood of autoimmune disease or of chronic health conditions. So those are some psychological things. What is only recently becoming known is that a rising tide of man-made chemicals and other changes to our environment are creating a similar impact on lifelong illness and mental health by threatening cellular safety. Children with chronic illness grow up to be adults with chronic illness. In the past 40 years, the fraction of children living with chronic disease has risen from approximately 5 to 10% in the 80s when I was a child to 40% today. Rising teen mental health issues add another 10 to 20%, so that 50% of teens struggle with a chronic illness. 60% of adults under 65 and 90% of those over 65 now live with a chronic illness, a number that has doubled since the 80s and continues to grow. So this is showing that within every population there are sensitive and resistant individuals, and that risk of harm is a probability, not a certainty. And what this basically says is that your past experiences are what fill the bucket, and you versus somebody next to you, you've got a whole different set of past experiences. Maybe you've had different upbringing, different childhoods, different traumas, different signals of safety, different signals of security, different financial backgrounds, but also different chemical backgrounds. And maybe one of you had financial security your whole life, but you lived in a moldy home, and so your cells feel this same danger, this cellular danger response. Or you've been exposed to different chemicals, or maybe you were C-section birth whereas somebody else wasn't, or the point is that all of our histories are different, and that's what sets somebody up for more of the calm or more of the sensitivities. It's all of the drops that fill the bucket that lead to this response. And what happens is there are two things that it leads to. There's a hypersensitive response, or there's not. And so in sensitive children and adults, their cell danger response has been primed by a perfect storm of previous chemical, microbial, physical, and or psychological stresses, and the same levels of chemical or biotoxin burden produce prolonged metabolic, epigenetic, and physiological responses. So this hypersensitive response has two major effects. One, it leads to disability and chronic illness, and two, it interferes with the body's natural ability to heal. So, wow. So what happens? What happens on a cellular level? What do your cells do? Here's a couple of charts. So at the top is healthy cells, cellular safety, the green. Down below in the red is cellular danger. So let's just start and look at some of these things. There's two of these. So over here on the right, let's look at the gut. So if things are healthy, if your cells sense safety, they're balanced. You have normal gut-brain communication, and you have health. If things go the wrong way, if your cells start to sense danger, they get an excess of these different bacteria in your gut. Then you start to get food sensitivities. You start to get overgrowths or imbalances, or what's called dysbiosis. You start to get symptoms, alternating constipation or diarrhea. How about over here, these metals? If things are good, they're excreted normally, and some of them are actually used for different metabolic pathways like iron, copper, zinc. If there's cell danger, things change and you start to waste away magnesium. So many people know they need magnesium or they benefit from magnesium. 85% of the population is deficient in magnesium. It's really, really prevalent, but why? And so you get magnesium wasting, you get thiol inhibition, and you get pseudohypoxia, you get hypoxic tissues, you get glutathione wasting because your body's detoxifying all these metals, and so it leads to problems. You get, let's go over here to tryptophan. And tryptophan is an amino acid. It's like what's in turkey that people say makes us tired, because when things are normal, tryptophan leads to 5-HTP, leads to serotonin, turns into melatonin. So that's good. When things get jacked up, tryptophan can go down this kynurenine pathway, which is neuroexcitatory and neuroinflammatory and can lead to neurodegenerative diseases like MS. So it goes down the kynurenine pathway. It's very inflammatory and it causes a lot of anxiety. When your gut's on fire, your brain's on fire, and your cells are in danger. Things like lysine, if it's going the right direction, it leads to methylation and 5-HT, and then it breaks up anxiety. When it goes the other direction, it can lead to more problems. What you'll see down here, here's cholesterol. And it goes normal, good healthy cell membranes, good healthy hormones. When it goes the other direction, you start to get cortisol defects. You start to get adrenal fatigue. Over here, B6, once again, the kynurenine pathway. So if things are normal, B6 is a cofactor for over 200 different enzymes. If things are bad, it goes to sites of inflammation and increases this kynurenine. Arachidonate, if things are healthy, it actually goes to something called anandamide, which is something that like CBD oil helps with. It's part of the endocannabinoid system. And you actually get fear extinction rather than, irrational fears like we see like in OCD and things like that. But if things are bad, it leads to inflammation. So what you'll see down here is a lot of inflammation. So even on this page, inflammation, anxiety, gut problems, neuroinflammation. Now this next one, same idea, but let's look here. So like Your oxygen, if things are healthy, it goes to water and it's just cellular respiration. If things are bad, it goes to the superoxide anion, which is the most harmful free radical that we have in our body, and causes a heck of a lot of damage. Same thing with mitochondria. They do good things if there's safety. They do bad things if there's danger. Vitamin D. How about we see that one very often? If things are healthy, it increases the activation and it leads to anti-inflammatory response. If things are bad, it leads to inflammation, leads to autoimmunity, can lead to folate receptor antibodies. So then you don't absorb B9 and then you get methylation defects because you're not getting folate and all these things. Cysteine, the rate limiting amino acid for glutathione. So if things are good, you build more glutathione. If things are bad, your glutathione is used to excrete chemicals and metals and keep those cells as safe as possible. And then you get problems. You get all these sulfuric anions. Folate and B12, so methylation. If things are good, you get your methyl tetrahydrofolate, you get good methylation. If things are bad, you get demethylation. SAMe, your body's universal methyl donor. If things are good, you get good neurotransmitters, you get good methylation. If things are bad, you start to get cytokine expression, which is inflammation. You look down here at histidine. If things are good, it blocks inflammation. It blocks NF-kappa B, which is like a major inflammatory pathway. If things are bad, you get inflammation. Arginine, if things are good, you get things going where they're supposed to. If things are bad, you start to get this nitric oxide, tissue-damaging inflammation, vasodilation and inflammation, but you also get inducible nitric oxide. Heme, you get good cytochromes. Or here's the last one, phospholipids. So when things are good, your cells are communicating with each other. They're a community. They're saying, hey, how's the weather over there? It's really good over here. You should come visit. Hey, I got a package off your front doorstep yesterday. I set it aside. I didn't want anybody to take it. Let me run it over to you later this afternoon. Hey, let me trim your bushes for you, whatever. If things are bad, then we get decreased cell-to-cell communication. So really, really important when you understand this. Now, so what do I see in practice? And going back to the stats, well, the stats are, over 50% of kids live with a chronic illness, 60% of adults, 65 or 90% of people over 65. So it's really, really common. So what do we see in our office, or what do we see in the population? Well, inflammation. I mean, my gosh, do we see inflammatory things? Inflammation is now known as the root cause of heart disease, of cancer, of diabetes, of Alzheimer's, of depression. The inflammation theory of depression is that there's neuroinflammation in certain areas that's slowing down cell-to-cell communication or inflaming and exciting certain areas. That's more of like an anxiety type presentation. But my gosh, we see it all the time in this kynurenine pathway, and we see neurological autoimmunity. We see it almost every single day. We do see it every day, I guess. Anxiety. How rampant is anxiety even before 2020? And people come in with anxiety. They're like, oh, I got this MTHFR gene, or I know that, and it's just stress. But it's like, yeah, it's stress, but your cellular functions are jacked up. We get bad gut health, dysbiosis. We get food sensitivities. We get GI symptoms. We see low vitamin D. In the middle of summer, we'll see somebody's vitamin D at 25. Low glutathione. We know that people need glutathione. Low magnesium. People need magnesium today. Poor methylation. Disrupted adrenals and adrenal fatigue. These are the most common things in the functional medicine practice. And what happens all too often is you can get distracted and say, well, you need vitamin D and you need B9 and B12 because we have these methylation deficiencies. And you need adrenal glandulars because you've got this afternoon slump and you've got these cortisol defects and you've got these energy issues. And you need glutathione because your body needs some support to detox. But why in the first place are all these things disrupted? We need to make the cells feel safe. So 3 steps to restoring cellular safety and hence restoring these cellular functions. So number 1, you have to remove the dangers, right? You can't You can't have your cells feel calm while there's still, toxins lurking right outside their doors, right? So you have to remove the dangers. You have to remove things like viruses, which can be really tough, right? Boosting the immune system. First off, how do you even know if you have a high viral load? Well, that's where functional lab testing comes in, because people very rarely, unless they get cold sores, a couple times a month or something, they very rarely know if they have viral problems, or maybe they have Epstein-Barr or something, or they had mono. But you've got to remove those things. You've got to boost the immune system, or remove anything that's allowing the immune system to be dampened, that's allowing these viruses to kind of replicate. You have to remove the toxins. You have to remove mold, and not just mold from the environment. You got to get out of a moldy environment for sure, but you could be out of the moldy environment and the mold could still be in your body. So urine mycotoxin tests to see, urine provoked heavy metals test to see what toxins are in there. But you have to detoxify, and you have to literally bind these toxins and get rid of them. But this isn't chelation therapy. This is more supporting detox pathways. So doing things like infrared sauna, or coffee enema, or lymphatic system, or rebounding. You've got to make sure that the detox pathways are open so you can get rid of these chemicals, these metals, these toxins. You also have to remove any psychological dangers. You might have to get out of a harmful relationship. You might have to get out of a harmful job that you might feel like is, not healthy for you. Get out of it. I mean, that's always an option. And sometimes things just aren't a right fit. That happens all the time, and you gotta get out of that situation. But you have to remove the danger. You can't dry off while you're still in the shower. Then you have to provide safety. So you have to provide your body with plenty of vitamins, with minerals, with clean air, with good food, with non-toxic food. Many of us are overfed and undernourished. So we've got to do the opposite. We've got to eat a nutrient-dense diet. We've got to be able to absorb those nutrients. You've got to provide clean air, clean water, clean food, and just the sense of a good environment where your cells are allowed to put their guard down a little bit and come out of their sheltered state, and we can finally relax and breathe again. And then number 3, you have to psychologically rewire your brain. And this is really, really important. This is where the mind-body medicine stuff comes into play. You can't just supplement your way out of all this, and you can't just counsel your way out of all of this either. You've got to do both. There's both of them at play here. So what do you need to do to rewire your brain? Well, one great way is affirmations, and just telling yourself, I am safe, I am healing, I am thriving, and telling yourself that you have this cellular safety. What happens is your subconscious mind, when you tell it things, that's your conscious mind. I could tell myself, I'm 7 feet tall right now, I'm, whatever, and I'm not. It's a lie. Your subconscious doesn't know truth from lie. So you can lie to your subconscious, and over time you program it to believe those things. So if all you are reading is USA Today headlines every day, you have programmed your mind to live in a state of fear. Whereas if you're telling yourself positive affirmations, you're telling your body, you're telling your cells, hey, we are safe, we've got this, we can come out of our shell a little bit. The second one is an attitude of gratitude, or a mindset of abundance. These are just mindset shifts of gratitude. You can do gratitude journals and things, but reminding yourself of the things that you have. No matter how big your problems seem to be to you, I'll bet you I could find somebody with bigger problems. We all got third world problems here in America. You're watching this on YouTube, your problems aren't too big, right? But I joke about this, that we talk about our problems as we fill our coffee into our Yeti, our organic coffee into our Yeti coffee mug, and then we get in our 2018 car and we text somebody on our iPhone 11, and we've got we've got all these resources. We've got name brand shoes on. We've got our kids have the Abercrombie clothes, or whatever the case may be. We've all got plenty, no matter where you're at in your situation. It's more of an attitude. And abundance is a mindset. Abundance is the opposite of scarcity. And scarcity is that whole feeling of like, oh my gosh, I never have enough. I gotta, there are millionaires with scarcity mindsets, and it's actually a pretty good idea of like, not be, frivolous, I guess, but who are like kind of scared and they want to hoard their stuff. They want to hoard their money. They're not willing to live because they're living out of fear of the what ifs of, what if my car breaks down? What if I go broke? What if I can't work? Even though they really have plenty. So it's an attitude of gratitude and a mindset of abundance. And then faith. And you could pick your own faith. I have mine, but it's that whole concept of like, yeah, I've got struggles, I've got fears, I've got things I'm working through, but God's got my back. And it's this like whole fallback plan of like, hey, yeah, things are going on, but God has a bigger purpose and God has a reason. And I know that if something happens to me, I know that there's a better afterlife waiting for me. And all these things that just mentally tell your cells on a cellular level, like, hey, chill out, we've got this. So faith, an attitude of gratitude, a mindset of abundance, and tricking your brain, rewiring your brain, because this doesn't just happen overnight. You've got to say these affirmations. You've got to do a gratitude journal. You've got to be intentional about all of these things if you want to rewire your brain. But most importantly, you have to stop living in fear. And that doesn't ever mean be reckless, but it means just, live your life and, forget about some of these fears have been put into you because fear sells, headlines sell, news stories sell. 2020 is, a perfect example of that, of like, oh my gosh, at first it was the fear of like everybody's dying, and then it was like, wait, no, they're not. But why does everybody still believe in all this fear? And we're not going to get into any of that right now. Whether you believe it or whether you don't, doesn't matter. You have to remind your body that it has cellular safety. You have to detoxify, you have to rewire your brain, and you've got to give yourself all the good things that your body needs so that your vitamin D can be optimal, your inflammation can be optimal, your neurotransmitters can be optimal, your methylation can be optimal, your cell-to-cell communication, your gut health. Sometimes it's not just about like, oh, you're deficient in all these different things. But if you keep peeling back the layers of the onion and you ask, why? Why am I low on vitamin D even though it's July and I wear a lot of short sleeves? Why do I need more methylation support? Why am I low on glutathione? Why do I have these inflammatory things? Why do I have this anxiety that hits me out of nowhere? That's a functional medicine approach, is really asking why? And I don't think you're going to ever dig any deeper than this cell danger response. I think it explains the why of every problem that we see in practice, every problem that people are suffering with today, and it explains how the environment leads to the health conditions that we're seeing. So I hope that was helpful.